welcome to the April 30th City Council work session. Welcome to everybody in the room and at home. We're going to be talking about a very interesting and promising thing today, the Bethel Community Park and YMCA lease. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn it over to Neil and Craig to walk us through a presentation.
How cool is that?
Okay, so it's been 6 months since the last work session, so I thought it might be helpful if I started off by doing a quick walkthrough of how did we get to here in the process. So the conversation between the city and the Eugene Y goes back to about 2009. Conversation about this idea of locating a Y in the Bethel area on parkland. The Y looked at the option, did some of their own kind of conversations with the community. They like to locate their facilities next to schools, and Bethel Park came up as a good prospect. So the city and the Y started some conversations. So there were a series of stages to the process. The first stage was for the city to assess, is there enough value and validity to this idea for the city to put some resources and take it the next step? And we concluded, yes, there was that validity and that value. So the city committed to doing a park planning process to revise the master plan at Bethel Community Park. And we started out with the question to the community, does community support having a larger community center facility in this park? Because the previous master plan already had a community center there, but it was a relatively small one compared to what we're talking about today. So we went out with that question. We did many meetings and surveys. We met with folks. We had a lot of discussions, and the outcome of that process was, yes, the community does support a larger facility in this park. And so then we looked at the question of, well, where in the park and how should it be configured and what are the particulars that will make this work well from a park standpoint. So we looked at traffic, and we looked at pedestrian access, and we looked at pedestrian safety, and we looked at impact on the neighborhood, and we looked at compatibility with the other facilities in the park. And we came up with a revised plan that was issued back in January of 2012. And we shared that with you last October in the work session. And that then set up the stage for the next phase of the process, which was for the city and the Y to discuss what kind of lease arrangement could we propose so that the Y would have some certainty going forward with the necessary fundraising and land use approvals that they would have to get to build this. That carried us forward into this discussion. So we've been talking with the Y over the last few months to put this proposal in front of you, the proposal for a 25-year lease at $1 a year. And I can go over some of the provisions in the term sheet if that would be helpful. But I'll start out with pointing out a typo, very important typo. So on the last page of the term sheet, you see the word parking underlined at the top and then utilities underlined. The last sentence in the paragraph under utilities should start out lessee will be responsible, not lessor. So
good.
Thank you, Glenn, for catching that typo. So everything else in there is accurate.
That's kind of a big one.
That's a significant one, yeah. Details.
Yes. Oops. It's on me. That was my typo. Would it be helpful to go over anything else on the term sheet? Because Craig is going to talk a little bit about kind of the what are the community values that are going to accrue from having this in a public park? Why would we be offering this lease at $1 a year?
Do you want to talk about the terms? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a list of questions. I think I just
So you want to wait until,
Well, yeah, then we'll just do it by questions.
okay.
Questions that you have about the terms, and
I
then we'll...
have a few questions.
Great.
I'll
So,
save them all.
Craig, why don't you...
Let me just go forward with some key points in the evolution of this partnership. Essentially, the city has served the Bethel area since the late 1960s when Alcoholic Pool was built, and in the mid-70s when Peterson Barn Community Center was built. We've always been aware that we need to expand our recreational resources out in the growing Bethel area. We've known that for several decades, and so this gives us an opportunity to do that. Peterson Barn, as it exists today, simply does not have the capacity to serve the growth that Bethel has had in the last few years. As identified by their Patterson Street facility, the YMCA offers a broad range of services for all ages. It's a multi-use recreation facility with a strong emphasis on health and fitness and child and youth development. And the Y has created a strong connection to the community as a valuable resource for individuals and families. We, the Recreation Division, have also completed a comparable analysis with our services and Y concerning accessibility and affordability. And we discovered, even though there's different business model, that they're very similar concerning those values we have on being accessible to the public and also being affordable. The Y does operate on a membership model, on a membership business model, but that doesn't prevent any individual from participating either on a drop-in basis or signing up for their classes. Also, according to the Y, no one is turned away from services based on their inability to pay. They have a very robust scholarship system that works well with their business model. The city, on the other hand, we do provide scholarships, but we also provide types of services and programs that don't focus on scholarships, but focus on programs in low-income areas. Like we currently are providing the after-school program at Club Bethel, Cascade Middle School. We're providing the Fund for All, and so we're using our funds to do programs in area that help low-income access those services. So when you make a comparison, you find the comparisons are fairly well comparable, and they're also, in my terms, I guess, they complement each other in how we serve folks. So at this time, the branch library within a Y building is also considered to be an opportunity to benefit both agencies. If somebody were to go to the Y and sign up and do a class, and they can drop by and get a book afterward. Or if somebody do a program at the library, they can also facilitate the Y programs at the same time. So we see that as a good opportunity. The Y at this time is willing to raise private funds to construct a 4,000 square foot building or room attached to their building for a cost of $600,000 to $800,000. And then the Y will then go ahead and rent back that space to us at the current rate in which we're renting space out in Bethel for a 3,000 square foot space. So we're actually getting kind of a 25% benefit to the space we're leasing. And then finally, based on the Y building their facility in multiple phases, we eventually know that the Y wants to construct a swimming pool. And at the appropriate time, when Echo Hollow Pool has come to the end of its useful life, we see it as an opportunity to determine that we would no longer operate Echo. The Y could build a pool, and then we could use other capital resources to look in other parts of town where we might rebuild a pool/community center where somewhere else that service is needed as an opportunity. So those are some key points in how this is moving forward.
So I just, I've got George in the queue because he already put himself in the queue, I think. I just want to make the comment that for me, this seems like something that would be great opportunities for the kids in the Bethel area, the families in the Bethel area. And to me, it also adds to what the schools can do. So that combination is really good, both in terms of academic possibilities as well as recreation possibilities. And I really like the idea of the library space there too. So all of that sounds really interesting and would serve our community well. George, do you have some questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Neil, for answering my questions at late notice so promptly. I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. I'd just like to go over one of them briefly. I asked where what was the funding source for the purchase of this parcel, and you said SDC funds.
Right.
Could you just briefly explain how that works?
Yeah, so park SDCs are one of the SDCs that are paid when new development occurs, and that funding goes into a pot of money that we use mostly to increase the capacity of the park system to accommodate new growth. There's a portion of it that can be used for rehabilitation of existing facilities.
And those are paid from development all over the city, not
Right.
specific to a neighborhood.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to verify that and to make sure that the property had not been bought with park bond funds or any portion of, because it would change this conversation significantly, because I just didn't want to have a problem pop up later.
Sure.
Because we've been told by bond counsel that property purchased with park bond funds cannot be leased, it can only be sold to other entities. So I wanted to make sure we didn't get into kind of a mess there later unknowingly. It could foul things up. Then my other, thanks for clearing that up, I appreciate that. Yeah, I just have a few questions. I mean, the 60,000 square foot building, is that footprint going to include the library and the pool, or will those be built outside of that?
That's at full build data would be
I see.
approximately 60,000.
Okay. And then I was just wondering, I looked at all the information you provided for the first public meeting last May, I believe it was, in 2013, and there was a great comparison with all the other rec centers and everything. And I was just wondering if the current Y is 75,000 square feet, so it's going to shrink down, and then add the library. And I'm just out of curiosity, I'm wondering, is tennis going to be subtracted from the part of that footprint as tennis courts? And I'm just curious if they were going to build tennis
Yeah,
courts.
well, Dave Perez is here in the audience. He would be better to answer
Okay.
that question. My understanding is tennis is not.
No tennis. Yeah, I was just kind of like adding up square foot and libraries and pools.
You want to come back?
Okay, thank you, Dave.
They
All
catch
right.
that on, excuse me for a minute, George. Did they catch what Dave said on the, because he's not by a mic? I just want to be sure.
The folks at home are raptured to know what you said, Dave.
Yes.
Yeah, give them a mic.
So Dave said that the tennis won't be included in the Bethel Y facility.
Okay.
Is that what you said, Dave?
That's correct.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Okay, my next question, on page 54 of the AIS, it's the last page of the, kind of the deal points. Under taxes, it says, quote, lessees shall be responsible for any taxes related to the structures and programs within the lease area. What taxes would those be? Might those be?
Well, that's a kind of a standard lease provision. So
I was
we
wondering,
didn't
yeah,
have
I
a
was thinking
tax
so
in
because there
mind.
probably won't be any because they're nonprofit, 501c3. Okay. All right. All right, well, I just noticed one thing. I think it's very promising. The residents seem to be excited about the idea. But I was looking at the information you provided for the first public meeting, and I'm just wondering if there's going to be enough parking spaces, for the footprint. I know a lot of the users will arrive by foot and by bike, but there's 199 parking spaces, and that's at Amazon Pool and Center, and this one is what 200 and some 200, well, not much more than that.
So in the next stage of this, there's a conditional use permit that has to be approved, and parking and compatibility and traffic and all that's going to be really the heart of that land use approval. So parking requirements, I mean, they'll have to meet the parking requirements in the code, as well as address parking concerns that come up from the neighborhood in the CUP process.
Well, I do realize,
Another round?
well, just one more sentence is all.
All right, one more sentence?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I realize these drawings are conceptual, but somewhat, pretty close to what it's going to be like. So I guess all that will come out later. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Greg?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think that this is a fabulous proposal. I've been supportive of it since before I came on City Council over a year and a half ago now, and the majority, I can say, of our community is extremely supportive of it. I don't think necessarily some of the concerns that Councilor Brown raised are as much of a concern for folks in our community as the fact that we add capacity in terms of our recreational footprint in Bethel, and this gives us capacity. This also pertains to the fact that this is the kind of public-private partnership that we should be pursuing, and quite frankly, I think is going to be the model for other private-public partnerships with the city and other governmental entities as we move forward in the future, given our current revenue constraints and our budget constraints. I think that's a really important issue to underscore. Additionally, I have a concern about the issue of Echo Hollow Pool possibly going offline. Where we have our tennis courts are at Echo Hollow Pool in that particular complex. I would rather not trade off one facility for the other facility, but use or reconfigure what Echo Hollow facility would look like in the future, as opposed to a shutdown or possibly having another cooperative relationship with the Bethel School District around maintaining that facility or converting that facility into other recreational uses. I think that the footprint looks good. I have had some concerns from neighbors about traffic issues, but one of the things that I also want to point out that people forget about in this conversation is the whole issue of public transit, and that MX and LTD will be able to service this area in a more robust fashion as we move forward, the West Eugene MX, and eventually what will come out as the Highway 99 MX. And so that will give people who don't have personal transportation options to get to the facility and move about and do the things that they need to do. So I'm very confident. I'm not concerned about the parking issues or the other issues that seem to be raised at this table. I think that we have a very healthy and a robust partnership that I think will be sustainable for many, many years to come.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Councilor Evans just said about this being a really great model for public-private partnerships and for increasing capacity for recreational services out in the Bethel area, which has been sorely underserved. I was going to raise the question about bus access. I know we talked about it the last time this came before us, and hoping that we can work with LTD, or at least make sure they're part of the conversation with the Y2 going forward about how we can make sure we're getting good service. If this becomes a destination, then that would, inform LTD in terms of how they do their routes. One thing I didn't see in the information, and I apologize if it was in there, was any kind of timeline for this going forward, and when can, if everything falls into place. I know there's permitting and lots of process to go through, but is there a general sense of timeline, and obviously a capital campaign as well? So
Yeah, so the lease terms have two timing factors built in. One is if the council directs us to move forward to execute the lease, we have 6 months within which to do that. If we didn't get it done in 6 months, we'd have to come back to you. And then it has a 5-year window within which construction would need to start. And if that didn't happen, then the city would have the option to terminate or revisit the lease.
And then I also agree with what Councilor Evans said about Echo Hollow Pool and not thinking about this as, oh, well, now we can let go of that asset because we've got something else that's coming online. I think we should still, as a community, continue to find ways to have the resources we need to have that asset out there as well. And then I just had a question about some of the details about the library piece, the branch library piece. I didn't quite follow, and maybe I'm making it more complicated than it needs to be. The idea is that the Y would raise the funds to build the physical building, and then then they would lease the building from themselves. I didn't follow that in the language.
You would lease it back to us.
They'd lease it back
We would
to
be a
us.
renter of
So
that
we
space.
would lease from them.
Space. Correct.
And I know this is far in the future, but so it would still be similar to the situation of the lease we have now, that it's a lease with a private party, and we have site control over the library itself. Is that a correct?
Correct. We'd work with the Y on that control, and the access points, we would be part of the design of the space and where it fits best for library services and where it also fits and flow with what the Y is building.
Great.
So,
I will say I have heard at least one member of the public say that they had concerns about relocating the branch library from where it's currently leased to this site because it's a little more remote from kind of the center of Bethel. So that's just one piece of public input I think is important to keep in mind. I wouldn't want that to stop this from going forward, but it's another perspective on the project. But thank you. I think this is excellent work.
Chris and then Alan. Chris?
Thank you. When I want to approach this as a classic win-win kind of situation, you want to think about the best win really is where there is no stakeholder group that winds up suffering, whether intentional or unintentional. So you think the city, with any of its different hats on, not just the one for your area, the YMCA, not only for its current interests, but also any future interests that they may have, for members or for people who want to drop in, for people who want to recreate, for people in the neighborhood, or for people who use libraries or use other services. Any one of those groups you want to potentially say this is a benefit to them, doesn't create any harm for them, and certainly is something that doesn't have an unintended consequence. I've not really identified that yet, but I recognize you still have details to work out. So what I would encourage you to say is keep that in mind, that you don't want an unintended consequence with any of the stakeholders as you put this together, because it looks like so far you've been able to pull it off, and that's a very encouraging thing. But as ideas or things come up, as different notions present themselves, being able to accommodate them sounds like it's within your scope, something you can do. So I'm very encouraged that we may actually have a win-win situation here, and if we do, that's something you don't get very often. So I think that is a very important thing for us to pursue.
Alan?
Yeah, Claire covered actually most of my questions, so I just add that I'm supportive of this. I think it's a very good model for moving forward public-private partnerships that Greg was talking about. I think it is a win-win. Question about fundraising for all of this. Where is the Y on the fundraising? How much do they actually need to cover this, including the branch library building, and how long will that take?
Dave, do you still have the microphone back there?
Will in a second.
You will in a second, yeah.
As you can imagine, we've been waiting till we get a firm lease before we go out and try to raise money for this. But we see this being built in phases. First phase would be approximately 25,000 square feet at approximately $5 million. And we, at this time, we're in the midst of hiring a campaign council. Should have them on board by the end of this month. The first 6 months of that will be primarily research in anticipation of the capital campaign. And most of the campaign work will be done over the next 2 years, but we expect to wrap it up in 3 years. From the
Just for
time we
that
get
5
started.
million part?
Pardon?
Just for that 5 million part?
For our entire capital campaign.
What's the total?
About 20 million. 5 million would be allocated to the West Eugene Bethel project and 15 million to the South Eugene project.
15 million.
And the 5 million includes the branch library part of the building?
Yes.
Cool, thanks.
So I wanted to ask a question about, have you thought about how bike access fits with this project?
We talked a lot about bike access as part of the park planning process. There was a lot of discussion about both pedestrian and bike access into the site, through the site, and around the site. And that will certainly continue to be a focus when we go through the CUP process.
Great, because I think this is just one of those opportunities to improve bike access in that part of our community that seems really important thing to be doing. So I appreciate that. You want to put a motion on the table?
Yes. I move to direct the city manager to draft and execute a long-term lease with the Eugene Y consistent with the lease terms in Attachment A and the map of lease area in Attachment B.
Second?
Moved and seconded.
Do we need to note the as corrected?
As
That there was-
corrected.
Yeah.
As corrected.
It's not the leaseor. All right. All those in favor, please indicate. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and none in opposition. It passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This conversation.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Next up is Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission.
I'll turn it over to Michelle Cahill for a presentation.
So,
Hello, Mayor and City Councilors. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us on your agenda. My name is Michelle Cahill, and I'm the Wastewater Division Director in Eugene Public Works. Happy to be here. Also like you to meet Matt Stauder. He's the General Manager for MWMC and works out of Springfield. And then I'd just like to acknowledge a few staff in the audience. Dave Breitenstein is our plant manager out of the treatment plant. Troy McAllister works for Springfield. He's a supervising civil and responsible for all the capital projects. And John Hubert is our financial and administrative manager, also out at the plant.
Welcome, everybody.
So we want to talk about Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission, and since that's a mouthful, I'm just going to say MWMC. And we just want to highlight, we think it's a fabulous program. We're proud to be part of it, and I hope you will agree that we are Eugene Springfield's resource for clean water and sustainable management practices. So, good. So, we have 3 areas we want to cover. The regional wastewater treatment plant is celebrating a birthday. We've been operating for 30 years. This month, actually, April 2nd, was the day the valves got turned. And so we're going to present information about that, and then Matt, and a lot of history and about our partnership and facilities and operations, and then Matt will talk about our capital program and our outreach and future opportunities, we'll say. And then I just make a note that on May 12th, on your consent agenda, we're scheduled for you to ratify the budget, and then it will go back to the commission for final approval, we hope, in June. So, brief history. You all probably know that in 1972, the federal government passed the Clean Water Act, and it put more responsibility and accountability on local agencies to help protect our waterways. At that time, both Eugene and Springfield had individual treatment plants, and both were looking at some capacity issues and now new regulatory drivers to do improvements. And both were considering substantial infrastructure investment. So rather than invest in 2 separate plants, the idea came about, and a partnership was formed in 1977 between Eugene and Springfield and Lane County. The partnership was able to garner 75% federal funding for the new treatment plant, and local funding made up the rest, and we broke ground in 1979. Took 5 years, but the treatment plant came online in 1984, and we are celebrating 30 years, as I said, of protecting the environment. We continue to do improvements as we find that they're good ideas and cost effective, and so in 1989 we started a biosolids management facility, and about 12 years we started a poplar farm, and in 2004 we did a big study to figure out what other capital improvements we'd need between now and 2025. Matt will talk a lot about that. So in celebrating 30 years, we're here. We also put together a little video that we'd like to show after these 24 slides, and then we're in the process of scheduling out some special events for the public. So it's a partnership built on partnership from Springfield, Eugene, and Lane County. We have a commission that is 7 people, 3 elected officials, and Councilor Brown, thank you for serving currently, and Councilor Pulling, I know you sat at the table.
5 years.
For 5 years, thank you very much. So there's representatives from each of the political bodies, and then there's 4 citizen representatives, and Commissioner Loud and Commissioner Myers send their regrets. They would have liked to be here today. So you can see that we have a big service area, all of the UGBs for Eugene and Springfield, and we accept domestic and industrial waste from users in both urban growth boundaries, as well as mobile waste haulers from outside the UGBs, and then we have a dump site for RVs and boats that anyone can stop by and give us their waste for free. So we operate to achieve and maintain 5 key outcomes, and probably no surprise, high environmental standards is one of them. Fiscal management that's effective and efficient, a successful intergovernmental partnership, maximum reliability and useful life of regional assets and infrastructure. And then there is a debate in the wastewater community kind of about this 5th one, but we think it's important that we achieve and maintain public awareness and understanding of what MWMC is and what is the regional wastewater system, and about our objectives in providing water quality and sustainable environment. So actually this next fiscal year we'll put a little more emphasis and reach out to the community, get a survey of what people understand, and that may lead to some more public outreach. Sorry for the unreadable map, but it's a portion of our geographic area, and I wanted to point out some of our facilities. Most of them are encircled. So we have a regional treatment plant and several regional pump stations. We have, the plant is here. We have more pump stations east of the freeway, and we have a lot of pipe that gets us to the plant and then out to the biosolids management facility, and our poplar farm is out there also. So we have $300 million in assets. That's the treatment facilities and pipes and pump stations. And so then just a little more specifically about what those facilities are. Our wastewater treatment plant operates 365 days a year, all 24 hours, all 7 days a week. And we can handle up to 277 million gallons and still meet our permit. But on average, we have 30 million gallons a day. Our operations are regulated by the State Department of Environmental Quality, which administers the Clean Water Act for EPA in our state, for the Environmental Protection Agency. We process wastewater, we reclaim resources, and we run a regional laboratory. The MWMC funds 77 staff working at the plant on River Avenue and in our biosolids facility and on Aubrey Lane, and running our industrial pre-treat program. So our staff includes operators that are certified by DEQ, lab analysts, technicians, mechanics, electricians, facility support, admin support, and the kinds of resources that we recover. The process for treating wastewater creates methane gas, And so we turn that into electricity and heat, and we use that in our processes and in our buildings. We also recover clean water, which we use in our processes and on our farm, and we give to the Willamette River, and we create soil amendments for our farm and for local farmers. And our biosolids go out to the biosolids management facility at Aubrey Lane, where we store and further stabilize biosolids. And then we land apply the biosolids to ag land and biocycle farm. We produce 4,600 dry tons annually, and they're considered Class B biosolids, so that means we need to manage and track and really be serious about where they go, as opposed to a few communities now are starting to produce Class A, which they intend to give to the public at some point. So we think this is the most cost-effective and efficient program for us at this time. And then I would just highlight that those 4 rectangles are facultative lagoons, where the biosolids get pumped every night and rest until and further stabilized until they're ready to move into this part of the facility, where we have a belt press that further dewaters. And then in the summertime, we move to the 14 asphalt drying beds that we furrow out the biosolids and not till, but we rotate it so that it gets further dried, and then it goes to farms, ours or others. And I would say we're very fortunate to have the program that we have. We create a useful product that's used locally, and in comparison to some other agencies where they take their biosolids to the landfill or they haul to Eastern Oregon to apply, we're really lucky to just use it all right here in the southern Willamette Valley. It is a year-round operation, but we do have seasonal peaks, like right now where we're starting to dry and later when we'll apply. We have 15 farmers signed up to receive our soil amendment, and then we own a farm. The Biocycle Farm, 600 acres owned by MWMC, and 400 of it is planted in poplar trees. We like poplar trees because they really use up nitrogen and water, and we have plenty of that. The land is an agricultural zone, so that requires us to rotate our crop every 12 years. You can see the trees if you're driving on Highway 99 in the vicinity of Airport Road, and Fiddler's Green has a couple landmarks, or along Aubrey Lane, southern part of the farm. We have 3 management units, and this last fall we did our first small harvest. I'm going to talk more about that and talk more about our future harvests too. So then moving into division specific, we are an international standard organization, 14001 certified, which means we have a very strong environmental management system where we strive to continually improve our approach to protecting the environment and our environmental performance. Over the years, and I'm thinking it's been close to 13 or 15 years that the division's been doing this, we've saved a lot of energy, we've gotten very innovative on what we reuse, and we have a strong recycling program. This year, in particular, we're looking at our pesticide use and making sure it's as minimal as it can be to still do good management of what we need to do. We're also looking at our air compressor use and finding some savings on how we can manage our air compressors. And then I just point out that we have regularly gotten awards from the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, NACWA. They give awards for when you meet your permit regulations, and platinum means you've met your requirements for at least 5 years. So we're proud of that. We also have a strong safety program. We meet with OSHA regularly. We have a lot of risky stuff that goes on, and we have a great record for our safety. And then last fall, I think it was, we received a sustainability award from the Portland business community. Matt accepted that on our behalf. And previous to that, we got an award from the governor's office for our leadership in energy. So then into what's been in the news lately, some funding issues. We're getting ready to suggest a rate increase on both the local and the regional funding. The funding supports both our capital and operating activities. The monthly user fee is billed by eWeb for Eugene and Springfield Utility Board. Our proposal is in 2014 for a customer that uses 5,000 gallons of water, their rate would go from $33.11 to $34.20, and that is for somebody who uses 5,000 gallons. But I would just make a note that Eugene citizens have been very good about conserving water, and a portion of the fee is based on water consumption, and their rate is closer to $3,400 than $500. So, and then I'd also like to note that we winter average, which means you pay for your consumption that you use on average in the wintertime, and not for what you irrigate your lawn or wash your cars or all the gardening activities you do in the summer. We have a capital budget of $14.9 million, funded by bonds, reserves, state revolving loan fund, and systems development charge. But back to the rates for a second. Our rates are set to meet our existing bond covenants and maintain a favorable credit and bond rating. And our philosophy is smaller, steady rate increases instead of big spikes. I think that's a better service to our ratepayers. And then we're positioning ourselves for future capital improvements. And then just finally, our finances are audited externally every year and reported to the commission. That we get lots of smiley faces usually. So I'm getting to my last slide. So we're MWMC, and especially the wastewater division, we're proud to contribute to better lives and growth in our community. The Eugene Public Works mission statement is making lives better through the services we provide each day. And I say wastewater division contributes to this mission by not just the treatment. We participate in this Eugene Stormwater Program and in a regional pollution prevention coalition, but at the plant and regional facilities, we provide treatment to the wastewater that's discharged from domestic and industrial users, and the treatment provides good health and well-being for our citizens, and it provides opportunity for economic growth while protecting the local and the regional environment. And so now, Matt is going to talk about capital.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and Councilors. It's a pleasure to be here to talk with you this afternoon. As Michelle said, I'll briefly go over our capital program and what we've been doing for the last few years and where we're heading. So, back in 2004, we adopted a facilities plan, which is basically a 20-year guiding document for our capital program. That facilities plan was adopted by the governing bodies of Eugene, Springfield, Lane County, and MWMC. It was a $195 million plan. Essentially, it had $195 million worth of projects identified in 2006 dollars. That was in response to permit regulations that are contained within our wastewater discharge permit that were handed down to MWMC and the communities by the federal government. To fund the projects associated with that plan, we sold bonds in 2006 and 2008 to the tune of about $115 million. We also took on $17.8 million in SRF loan funding.
State revolving loan fund from DEQ.
And I'll just note that we did have a favorable construction climate for some of these projects, which allowed us to utilize our money to the maximum extent we could, and allowed us to push out for future bond sales further. So this is an outline of a schematic of our treatment plant, and you'll notice the yellow line there. That's representing incoming flow, and that's showing it as it migrates through our treatment plant. So first, as flow comes in, it goes through what we call pre-treatment, and that's where we have solids, and we have
Laser.
Sure. That's where we have removal of grit, floatables, trash, etc. And really, the purpose of that is to protect our downstream equipment. As the flow continues on, it goes through primary treatment. Solids fall out, continuing on, it goes into what we call secondary treatment, where we have biological removal of dissolved material. And then finally, we do a disinfection treatment prior to discharge back into the river. That's kind of a high-level overview. Thank you. So some projects we've completed in the last several years. We did 2 projects to expand the capacity that we could treat at our plant. We had a headworks expansion project and a peak flow management project. Those 2 projects totaled about $45 million. And really, the primary purpose was to take on additional capacity in response to some regulations to treat more flow, because there was a bacteria standard that was implemented in Oregon, and this was in response to that. We've also done some improvements to our aeration basins to make them more functional. And I would point out that the lagoons that we have at our biosolids management facility that Michelle spoke about, we recently relined those. There are 4 of them, and the purpose there was to, the existing clay liners were starting to reach the end of their useful life, and we were interested in replacing those and further protecting the groundwater resource out there. We've invested in odor control. We're trying to be a good neighbor given our location at River Avenue. We're close to residential neighborhoods, the Willamette River, and the path that's out there. So we have a lot of activity, and so we did invest in some significant odor control projects to reduce odor. Two other projects that were completed recently. We upgraded our sodium hypochlorite. We did a sodium hypochlorite conversion project where we essentially took gaseous chlorine and replaced that with hypochlorite, which is essentially bleach. There were some safety concerns with using the gaseous chlorine, and this was an attempt to eliminate that. And we also did phase 1 of 3 phases of a tertiary filtration project, which provides further treatment of our total suspended solids, but also allows us to expand the use of our recycled water program, which I'll touch on briefly. Michelle talked about our BioCycle farm. You may have noted that we did do a harvest out there this year. We have 3 management units, and we harvested a third of the first management unit. That was 52 acres. It was a trial harvest. We worked with a local contractor, Elaine Forest Products, on that project, and the remaining 2/3 of that harvest will occur in the next 2 years. We harvested 100% of the tree, and we took the materials and we chipped them, and we made some of the material into hog fuel, and those were sent to local markets. The materials went to Kingsford, they went to Seneca Sustainable Energy, Georgia Pacific, and then they went as far as Longview, Washington to Kraft Capstone, where they used some of the product for cardboard. We do have a robust public outreach program. We provide facility tours for anybody who is interested. We usually do several hundred a year. We have a program called Clean Water University where we educate 5th grade students. They go through the water cycle process. They do field sessions on macroinvertebrates, learn about stormwater, learn about wastewater, where the water goes, and it culminates with a trip to the treatment plant, and they're presented with the graduation certificate. Our commission is also interested right now in kind of shaping our image as we move forward, so we have a subcommittee that's been developed, and we're looking at, as Michelle said, polling some of our users to see what they know about MWMC and what they'd like to know about us. This is going to be particularly important as we move forward into the future and get a new permit. We anticipate stiffer regulations and potentially needing to work with folks to potentially modify some behavior depending on where the permit regulations go, so we can, because some of the things that are put down into the drain that end up in our treatment plant, we can't treat. Briefly, Michelle mentioned that we are focused on resource recovery. We do have a recycled water program. Part of that was the tertiary filtration that I showed you earlier. We irrigate our poplar farm with that recycled water. We've had preliminary conversations with the aggregate community about using some recycled water for wash water. and we're continuing to have those conversations. We do power over 60% of our plant with the methane gas that we capture from our process. And we do, as Michelle said, produce essentially fertilizer, what we call biosolids, that we use to fertilize our poplar trees and give to local farmers for their ryegrass fields. And then our poplar, of course, we harvest and give back to the put back into the local community. So one last slide, just kind of where we're going. We are positioning ourselves for a future permit renewal. There's a number of things that we're expecting may impact us moving forward. You may or may not be aware that Oregon's temperature standard was recently invalidated. The state has a plan for temperature. It's in response to endangered salmonids in the different river systems. That's been in flux for some time, and it was recently invalidated. What that means for us moving ahead, we don't know exactly, but there are periods of time where the wastewater discharge that the effluent, the clean water that we put into the river may be warmer than the river, and there's a concern that that could be a impact to salmon. We also have the most stringent toxics standards in the nation. Things like pesticides, copper, metals, mercury, copper, etc. Those standards will impact us as we move forward. To what extent yet, we don't know. Obviously, these things are going to be drivers for us, moving forward with respect to budget rates and our future capital programs. We do have an e-newsletter. If you're interested, you can sign up for it. Website is right there. And at this time, I know we have a video, but we can entertain questions.
You want to show the video? That might be best. Okay.
For the past 30 years, a regional organization has been working to protect our health and safety and our local environment. The Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission is a partnership of Eugene, Springfield, and Linn County.
The Water Pollution Control Facility, also known as the Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, opened in 1984 and served 166,000 people. 30 years later, we serve 220,000 people, and we operate 24/7, 365 days a year. We treat 13 billion gallons of wastewater each year, and we're here to protect the water quality of the Willamette River and provide for economic development and growth in our community.
The Water Pollution Control Facility on River Avenue in Eugene accommodates growth in our community. Without such support, our community could not exist. Creating and maintaining a sustainable environment is another benefit of the facility.
I grew up on the North St. Anne River, and so I appreciate the value of the clean water. And I remember a time when the Willamette wasn't that way and wasn't safe to come into contact with. So I really take pride in having been able to be a part of turning that around and making the river safe for the community and everyone that uses it. I came here in 1983 to help start up a new advanced treatment facility. Back then, Eugene and Springfield each had their own treatment plants, and it took more people to operate the new facility, and I was one of them. It was a challenge to bring in a number of people and work together, but we had a diverse background of education and experience, and it all came together to make the startup a success for the community. The original regional treatment plant in Eugene and Springfield, they had limited capacity. That was one of the reasons the new plant needed to be constructed. The new plant was twice the combined capacity of both. But over the years, we still had some capacity issues as with growth, and so the plant did re-expand from being able to treat 175 million to recently now 277 million gallons a day.
The Regional Wastewater Program includes the state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant where we efficiently and effectively treat wastewater and recover heat and energy and soil amendments that we apply on the BioCycle farm where we grow thousands of poplar trees.
Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission has been around for the last 30 years. We're celebrating 30 years of our regional wastewater treatment plant this April. For the past 30 years, we've been protecting the health and safety of the Eugene Springfield residents by providing clean water to the Willamette River, while at the same time enhancing the livability of our community. Over the last 30 years, the wastewater industry has evolved and it will continue to evolve in the next 30 years. The MWMC is looking to keep pace with the ever-changing industry by increasing the use of the electricity that we generate at the plant, by increasing the use of the amount of water that we recycle, and at the same time protecting the health and safety of the Willamette River and offsetting the costs to our ratepayers.
30 years of clean water, thanks to dedicated staff and citizens of the Wastewater Management Commission and the Water Pollution Control Facility. Tours of the facility are available. For more information about tours and about wastewater in our area, check the Public Works link from the City of Eugene's website.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready for some questions?
Bring them on. We're ready.
I have Mike and Ellen in the queue, and George, and Betty. And I'm going to let George go first, actually, because he serves on that, and I wanted to know if he had something he wanted to say about it first. So.
Yes, I do, Mayor. Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. It was wonderful. You know, wastewater treatment, the management of this waste is so fundamental to civilization that it's often overlooked by a lot of people. Everybody just takes it for granted. You know, you turn on your sink, you flush your toilet, and you forget about it. And without this facility, you know, city life would really be impossible. It would be like a third world city with sewage flowing down the middle of the streets and polluting the river. And in the film, Dave was correct. The Willamette used to be one of the filthiest rivers in the United States, believe it or not that many decades ago. And that's been mitigated partly by more, you know, stringent controls on industrial users and their effluent, but also by the construction of this marvelous facility. And, you know, you can go swimming in the Willamette now. I still wouldn't recommend drinking it without boiling it or running it through a filter or, you know, using iodine or something. But you can go swimming in it now and not get ill. That was not the case a few decades ago. And, you know, it's just that I feel that the commission, the plant is so well run, and the commission is, it's really a wonderful example of regional cooperation. And I will tell you that all of the commissioners are very concerned about the health of the river, the efficient running of the plant, and also the effects on the ratepayers. These are the primary concerns that we always discuss and go pretty deeply into. And so you know, and there's questions now about you know, the new standards for a permit that and maybe you could give us some kind of give the council some kind of a timeline where you are with your discussions with the EPA.
Well, sure. We don't know exactly when we can expect a new permit. We actually have a permit that's been administratively extended since 2006. They're at 5-year permits is what they're supposed to be, so we should have got one in 11. We're on extension, and that's just by DEQ's choice. We think within the next couple of years we'll be up for a permit due to the uncertainty with the temperature standard and a number of other issues that have been litigated by the environmental community. DEQ has been they have not been issuing permits, so new permits.
Yes,
they're starting to now. So we work with state agencies, Oregon Aqua Association of Clean Water Agencies, on a regular basis. And we converse with DEQ on a regular basis as well, and we hope to know more soon.
Thank you. Thanks. A very good presentation. I like the video.
I think you really like serving on it, too.
Well, just one more comment, please. That, you know, the part of the concern with the DEQ is the thermal load mitigation, the temperature of the water that we return back into the river, how it affects the health of salmon, and how, you know, users downstream are affected. And just, you know, it's so great for me because I also serve on the McKenzie Watershed Council, that concerns are interlocking like this with their, planting of shade trees on the south side of the river to warm, provide shade to lower the temperature of the water before it gets to the treatment plant, and all these efforts are really closely interrelated. Thank you.
Well, I know Peter Ruffio used to tell us about, we were dealing with that issue back when he was here about the temperature issue. Yeah. Mike, you're next.
That's really interesting. That touches on exactly what I wanted to talk about. Matt, Michelle, thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate that. It was very well done. Can you give me more detail about the suit that took place and about the decision that you mentioned with regard to the thermal issues and what the new standards will look like with EPA?
I'll attempt to. Yeah, it's draw from the memory bank here. So we have in our existing permit, we actually have a temperature provision, and we're meeting that. Oregon has a temperature standard that's been in development. It's been for the last 10 years they've been working on it. We thought we got to a place where we had a temperature standard that was defensible, and it contained what was called the natural conditions provision, which contained a human use allowance, which allocated to cities and other uses, and it allocated a little bit of additional heat to those cities. So when we talk about temperature, we don't measure temperature at the end of our pipe. We measure the amount of heat that we're putting into a system in kilocalories. So basically, our permit allowed us to discharge so many kilocalories to the river. When this human use allowance, which allowed, it was a 0.3 degrees Celsius allowance, which was distributed to different communities up and down the Willamette River, that would allow us to discharge a little bit more heat during periods of real low flow and high temperature. The way they allocated that and the way they came to calculate that, DEQ, there was a suit filed that was inaccurate, and essentially after a period of several years, there was the federal court agreed that was done incorrectly, and so that was taken away, and now what we have is a numeric standard that's fairly stringent. That probably didn't fully answer your question, but...
No, it kind of does, and I'm not exceptionally well educated about all of the details and the science involved here. It's very complicated, and I appreciate both these gentlemen's service over time on that body. But I know I have a friend who was a Cottage Grove city councilor for a number of years, who I think served as well at some point in another body similarly. And I can remember a story him telling me about this issue, that it was a big issue in the future one day. This was a conversation we had a few years ago. And he was telling me about a study that was done on the Umpqua that nobody ever talks about, and he wished they did, and he wished more people knew about it. And I'm going to have to go back to him and get more of that information. But a scientist measured the thermal heat loss over space, over time, and essentially, if I took, for example, a cup of boiling water and a cup of ice water, and I put them outside on the deck here, within a certain amount of time, within an hour or two, both those cups would be full of water that was the same temperature. It's just a matter of time before they reclimate themselves, or they get themselves to regulate back to the Earth's temperature at the time, to essentially normal. The study's point was that it only takes 150 feet for any temperature you add to a particular sized body of water for the Earth to normalize it to normal temperature. So the only thing we're talking about, it doesn't change the temperature of the river permanently, it just changes it for a distance. So I wonder myself how much of that sort of calculation is brought into when EPA deals with this. I don't know the science very well. Is that sort of thing discussed? Is that sort of science a part of their determination when they talk about temperature loads?
Yeah, I believe it is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but USGS has done an extensive model on temperature in the Willamette River, and they've modeled the various sources of temperature inputs along with changes over time in the daily temperature patterns. And they have a pretty robust model that they feel fairly confident in. Where the concern was is when they how they allocated this additional allowance. The way they allocated that and the way they created that was the piece that was challenged. The modeling itself, I think they're fairly confident in that data.
Okay. One of the other pieces you talked about was, and I can't remember the number you used, I thought it was $195 million in terms of your 20-year. Now, is that an SDC list, or is that your own capital list? And how does that interact with the SDC list?
That was our 20-year capital plan, and that was in 2006 dollars, $195 million. And those projects were funded with the bonds that we sold, paid back with user fees and with SDCs.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Alan?
Michelle and Matt, good presentation. I like the video too. This is fundamental infrastructure and an environmental service, and so thank you for doing such a good job in keeping our water clean. It's often said that for MWMC, year number 2 is our number 1 priority. The rate increase that is currently going on increases our rates slightly, about about $1, a little over $1 per average customer. After that goes into effect, how is our rates compared to other wastewater facilities in the region in Oregon?
That would have been a good graph to show. We do share that with the commission, and I believe for Eugene we are like the 4th or 5th lowest out of 30 agencies that we compare against. Eugene, because
yeah, I think that the comparable average, we've looked at a number of communities, it's about $42, $43. Eugene's at 33. Eugene is fairly low. Springfield's at just a little bit above the average, and that includes the regional and the local components. The regional is about $23, $24.
Actually, he's got the graph right there, and we're second from the bottom.
Hard to tell here, but you look at Wilsonville, Portland, McMinnville, Albany. Here's Springfield. Eugene's down here, fairly low.
So we're actually one of the lowest in the state.
Yes.
In terms of, even after the rate increase, still way on the bottom of that scale. Okay, that's good to know. Thanks for keeping up the good work on that front. With the expansion that we had at the plant, that of course was for growth and it created surplus capacity. How much surplus capacity in years do we have that you estimate at the plant?
With the infrastructure we have currently, how long can we go?
Yep.
Well, I think our highest flow so far has been 231 million gallons per day, and we can treat up to 277. It's widely variable. It depends on how much. It's really driven by inflow and infiltration, how much rainfall we get in a period of time, and what the antecedent conditions are. If it's really been wet, we're coming in and we get a really heavy storm in February, we get a lot of inflow in through our pipes. From a wet weather perspective, I think we're continuing to work on our systems to try to tighten them up. From a dry weather capacity, base flows, we can go quite a while without expansion, I believe.
So the facility plan was for 2025, so definitely out that far. We recently did a flow and loads study that for most of the components of the treatment were solid. Beyond that, our capital improvement includes a new digester to help the whole treatment system go beyond that. I don't remember the year it was projecting, but
So at least 2025 before any expansion, probably much longer than that.
yes.
So,
Growth-related expansion. Yeah,
growth-related expansion, not including permit and requirements.
Yeah, and we've been fairly silent on the local agencies' part, but we couldn't do our job except for that the local agencies have the collection systems, run those very efficiently and effectively. Both cities have strong infiltration and inflow removal programs, which we count on and are anticipating those to continue to keep the wet weather flows down and keep us meeting our permit requirements.
On the Poplar Farm, I guess it merits noting that when the decision to do the Poplar Farm looked at all the different options that MWMC had for disposal of that wastewater and the uptake of the heavy metals, and that the Poplar Farm was by far the cheapest option of everything that was in front of MWMC. So it started off as the most cost-effective option, and continues to be. And so it starts out as cost-effective and is a good idea. Clean Water Services, I believe, got national news recently for allowing their facilities to be used for weddings. You guys have any similar plans? I don't think they have any bookings yet, but
Weddings.
We saw that. It actually came up.
I don't think our facilities, well, actually, I recently heard a former commissioner got married on top of the digester. And I'm sorry I don't remember their name, but this was well before my time. So we've held one, apparently. And
I guess we shouldn't poo-poo the idea.
no, yes, thank you.
Captain Metaphors on top of his game.
no more crappy metaphors.
Yeah.
We know that one, I'm sure.
The other thing that's been in the news lately is has been flushing or not flushing of drugs down the toilet. And can you explain why flushing prescriptions, drugs, and other drugs down the toilet is a bad idea, and maybe go into a little bit about the Drug Take Back program?
I can say anytime you can prevent the pollution at the source, go for it. Do that. That's the most cost effective. That's the best thing for the ratepayers. The treatment plant is a biological process. It's meant to deal with human waste. It really isn't. We don't have a lot of process to take pharmaceuticals out of the waste stream. That being said, we meet all our permit requirements. We don't find pharmaceuticals in our biosolids, which is where they would tend to collect. So we have a safe program. We did participate with Pollution Prevention Coalition to get the boxes in all the law enforcement agents locally, so anybody, whenever the lobbies are open, can go and dispose of their pharmaceuticals in an appropriate manner. And then there are, seasonally, there are drug take-back events in the community.
So in Eugene, anybody can go to the police station 8 to 5, and there's a specific place to dump off your pharmaceuticals.
Yes, on Country Club Road.
On Country Club Police
Yes.
Station, right? Right. A big part of that is a public safety issue around. One of the things they find about young adults is that where they're getting their drugs are their own drug cabinets from their houses, and so getting rid of those drugs can sometimes create a better circumstance in certain households.
There's been studies, as Michelle said, it goes through our system, it doesn't get removed, and so there's been studies done, and it does impact aquatic species. And they've been shown to affect, how fish reproduce, et cetera. And there's also concern that in the future we'll be regulated on those pollutants. But not only that, downstream there's communities that use the water for their water source, and if we can't remove it, and it's not being potentially removed on the other end, there could be concerns.
Next up is Betty.
Thank you. Who knew this could be so entertaining?
We love it.
When I was first elected, Ruth Dimmler, who was then of the MWMC, and Peter Rufio gave me a private tour of the place, which was even more interesting than the video, and I assume that people who haven't done that might like to do it, though I don't think I'd want to get married there. But it was interesting. I had some questions about, did I understand correctly that if I water my lawn in the summer, I'm not making my rates go up?
For the wastewater bill, your water rate is
I know the water rates,
but
I realize that, but wastewater, because I think that watering is actually contributing to the health of the community because it keeps the trees and shrubs alive, which absorbs some of the pollution. And in line with that, I'd like to say once more, preserving the Amazon headwaters helps to prevent further pollution and further warming all of that goes into the Willamette River. The fertilizer that you have, well, I know it can be used, it's good fertilizer. Once I went to a meeting of a garden club in another state, and I didn't realize what I was doing. I got dressed up. People used to get dressed up to go to garden clubs, even have a hat on, I think. And I went, and what they passed out was shovels and buckets, and we went out to the sewage plant to get fertilizer for the gardens.
You were the best dressed shoveler out there.
I was at that time.
That's a heck of a picture.
Had my 8-year-old son with me. That's a long time ago. But anyway, they called it sludge. Is that what you still call it?
It gets called that a lot by the media and others. We call it biosolids.
And what kind of crops do the farmers use that for?
Non-food crops like ryegrass is a primary one.
That's good.
And there is a portion of our treatment where it is sludge. We recycle the sludge. It's full of good bugs that help the whole biological process for treatment. But once it's treated and the pathogens are removed, it really is a biosolid, not a sludge anymore.
I see. And when the drugs go through bodies, are they less potent? I mean, all the drugs that people take are going to end up in the sewage.
Well, we hope anyone would take drugs that would be absorbed and utilized in their body and not a lot of excess, but what was the question again? Sorry.
I was just adding to the humor for Doug, I guess.
If the drug comes out in human waste, is it less toxic?
No, I don't think so.
Very mellow fish.
But I'm not a
Unless you take the
doctor.
exact specific
I don't take drugs. But
It's the subject. It's really awful. Yeah.
maybe we should. Maybe those of us who do take drugs should be careful. I don't take them myself. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that, though.
It's a prescription.
Right, that's
Talking about.
All right. Claire.
Bills.
Clean this up, Claire.
Yeah, no, don't count on me
it's
for
back
that.
around.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I also agree it's very interesting and well done. I was curious, Michelle, you mentioned in referencing the public education and outreach that sometimes there's some debate about that, and I was wondering if you might talk a little bit more about that.
Well, we've historically been a service that's taken for granted. Flush your toilet, drain your sink, don't worry about it anymore. But it's important for us that people understand the impact that they have on our environment, and what they send down the sink and what they flush down the toilet has a big effect. And so elevating the awareness of what happens after it leaves your home is important if we want to change people's behavior about what they dump down the toilet, etc. It's important so they know when they write their check for something less than $34.10 or whatever, that's they're getting a great value for that, and that it really helps our city exist in a way that's healthy for all of us and allows us to face the challenges you all address every day in terms of how does the community grow, how does the community sustain itself.
Yeah, that's great. And I really appreciate the, was it 5th grade class that you do? I think that's a really important piece of education about our public infrastructure and getting at kids that age. I mean, that's just something they'll carry forward with them no matter what city they live in. And then I was curious, Councilor Brown, serving on the body, said that protecting or being considerate of ratepayers was a big focus. What are some of the drivers, the primary drivers of a rate increase?
So I think, we glossed over that a little bit or touched on it briefly, but paying back for the debt service coverage requirements for the existing bonds that we have sold is a big factor. And then obviously there's tremendous amount of ongoing operations and maintenance for the $300 million worth of assets that we have. And then positioning ourselves, we're trying to position ourselves so that we can be more of a pay-as-you-go utility moving forward. We'd like to build up our reserves so that when we get new permits and new requirements, we can fund those mostly with existing money and not have to go out to the market and pay additional money and interest and other fees. And then, again, just the general concerns about where we're going to be in the future.
And then you mentioned there might be some changes in the permit that may require some increased public outreach about what people are putting down the drain. And, this conversation about the disposing of prescription drugs, in the way that we might conserve water in order to reduce our water bill, are there things that we as individuals can be mindful of that can help reduce costs or make the system work better?
I would say don't flush anything down your toilet that hasn't gone through your body, as maybe a general guideline. Don't.
Even there are things about that you don't.
Yes, even some of those. Well, there's a whole list. My mind's kind of going
Sorry.
blank.
Whoa,
Mind boggles at that.
And then in choosing your personal care products, the ingredients on your lotions and just any chemicals you use that could be closer to what you find in the natural environment will be better.
Yeah. So it just puts less of a load on the system in terms of treatment.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not a wastebasket.
Yeah. No, I think that's
Exactly.
important. Yeah. Thank you. Those were my questions.
George Pollak.
Thank you. Yeah, I first was appointed to MWMC board in 2003, and I think I replaced Gary Rayer, who had the technical knowledge about what was going on. I was thrown in up to my eyeballs in a sea of swirling technical stuff. And I just, I never got the opportunity, but I just wanted to thank Peter Ruffier and Susie Smith and all the staff, two of the gentlemen who are here today, that did a real good job bringing me up to speed real quick. Because when I first came on, the Poplar Farm had just, I think, was the first planting had just gone on, and they had problems with the watering system. Is the wrong kind of a pump for the type of materials going through the system. So there's a big lawsuit over that. They were going through the 20-year master facility plan. We worked on that, and we were at a period of time where the system was 20 years old, and believe it or not, there were some problems with some of the equipment and structures that they pretty much had outlived their life cycle, and with the advancement of technology, there's a lot of new things were coming online. So it was a real exciting time, and also the big argument of when we were talking about the facility plan, is it adding capacity or is it upgrades to the system? So I enjoyed the 5 years I was on the MWMC, and I'd like to get back on there before I leave the council at some point. But I attended a conference in Sun River with the Aqua?
Mm-hmm.
The Aqua conference, and I think it was 05 or 06, 07, somewhere in there. And two of the topics that were covered, one of them was the pharmaceutical waste going into the sewer system, and it was a big topic back then. And I never even gave it a second of thought until I attended that conference. What kind of pollution that causes, what kind of dangers it causes. And the other topic, and I don't know if they're still talking about this, but there were numerous examples of cities and organizations throughout the United States where their motto was toilet to tap. They were taking this water that was being processed out, and they were actually using it for irrigation on farm crops, edible farm crops. So, I kind of lost track of where that technology went, but, I can see that, someday coming back around again. I do have one question. Is my MWMC coffee mug still floating around somewhere over in Springfield? I never got it when I left the board.
I'll take a look.
Look for that.
Yeah.
It's probably there.
I'll find it now.
They're using
Covered
it.
in mold.
Yeah, it probably is.
Collect urine samples.
So I noticed in a recent article on the Poplar Farm that it seemed to kind of go about whether you got enough money for the sale of the poplars, and maybe not enough about that's nice, but that's not the main purpose of doing it. And so I think that being able to get to people that full story again, that the reason you did it was not for thinking you're going to make a big profit out of it. It would be nice, but the reasons were really very different from that, and were environmental reasons. So just
Thank you.
Yep.
No, you're exactly right.
Cheap is a solution and a good solution for the environment. And the other thing I wondered about in your conversations about wastewater, are you talking about climate resiliency and things of that sort in terms of your future?
We've had a few conversations at the staff level about that. It hasn't been in front of the commission.
It just seems like an important conversation to have, because if we have less water, if we have more dry seasons, it's just going to have an impact. I know in the long term, and the other conversation that George was talking about, that whole planting climate-resistant trees or resilient trees are part of the work that's being done. But it just hope that you have that conversation. Anything else?
One other, Mayor.
Yeah, this is fine.
You talked about the 300 million in assets, and then you talked about pumping stations and things that are spread out just geographically, other than just the River Avenue stuff. As I understand this, actually, I guess I want to ask that this question. Do I understand it right? The predominantly, the most of the sewer pipes that run under the city are the city's asset.
That's
where
true.
when we get to the plant itself, that's your assets, right?
Predominantly,
So in
800 miles.
turn, the age of our city's sewer pipes and the cracks and the amount of water that flows into them in the winter is our responsibility rather than MWMC, right?
True.
And you touched briefly on that, but what's the range of that effect between summer and winter in terms of gallons? So if you measure that sort of inflow sort of to the system through cracked pipes and
We have flow monitors placed strategically throughout the system. I can't speak to Eugene other than I know it's similar, very similar to Springfield. And on the Springfield side, when we worked on our master plan locally a few years back, it was we were 7 to 8 million gallons per day as our dry weather flow, and our highest flows that we were seeing in the winter were 90 to 95 million gallons per day. So that's a lot of rainwater, or a lot of groundwater coming
that seeps into the sewer system. Yeah.
And at the plant, we dry weather's close to 30 every day, 30 million gallons a day. And then rain events, it really depends on the event and how saturated the ground is. But it's not uncommon to double, and we've seen it 5 times as high. It's better than
having to leak out.
So essentially, I guess the point I'm getting to is that the state of our city's sewer system affects to a great deal your system's capacity.
And that's where the partnership comes in. You're correct, because then at the plant we're responsible to make sure we treat it and that we don't have any overflows and that it meets environmental standards. And if we have a violation, it's a joint permit between the cities and MWMC.
It's interesting to me because water flows both ways in a crack of a piece of concrete pipe. So I wonder if you have any comments about to what extent you think we have an issue with an aging system with the stuff that flows through the pipes leaking out.
I do have a comment. I've seen a lot of the video of inside pipe. Often the cracks are on the top or at the service tees.
Okay.
And our flow in our pipes under dry weather conditions is only taking up a small portion of the pipe. So, and it's flowing at gravity and atmospheric, whereas you get a high groundwater table over your pipe and it's got more pressure. So I'm a strong believer that we're not exfiltrating our wastewater, maybe at all, but definitely not to the ratio that we're seeing inflow and infiltration coming into the system.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for asking.
That was a very great conversation. Thanks so much for coming today. We really appreciated the presentation. And
Thank you.
We all learned a lot, I'm sure, so thanks so much.
Well, and I would like to invite you, the wastewater division is having a booth at the Eugene Public Works Day on May 15th out at the Roosevelt Yard. So if you want to come chat more wastewater stuff, stop by our booth.
All right.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
After a couple